We are on Terumah Perek Bet Mishnah Aleph. We're going to talk about two types of Terumah, Terumah Tahor and Terumah Tamei. So in this discussion, we need to understand that you have to give both Terumah Tahor and Terumah Tamei to the Kohen. What does that mean, Terumah Tamei? Let's say, for example, all the grapes that I have are Tamei. Somehow they all became Tamei. What are you going to do? They got wet and then somebody Tamei touched them all. So you can't say, well, because they're Tamei, I'm exempt. That's not the way it works. You take off, you have to designate Terumah and give it to the Kohen. The only problem is that Terumah Tamei can't be eaten. It has to be burned. And the Kohanim can benefit from its burning. So in grapes, it's not going to help you. But for example, if it's grain, you could burn the grain and it warms the house. Or if it's oil, they would use the oil to light their house. So therefore, the Terumah Tamei was given to the Kohen, and he used it and he destroyed it in a way that he could benefit from. If it was Terumah Tahor, the Kohen would eat it obviously, and he could use it in any way, appropriate way he saw fit. What if I have both Terumah Tahor and Tamei? So says the Mishnah. And tormin mitahor ala tamei. I can't. Let's say I have grain that's tamei, and I have tahor produce also. So I say, you know what? I don't want to mess up the kohen. I'll designate from my tahor, and that'll also exempt the tamei. So the Mishnah, so that you would think that would be a good solution because then the kohen wouldn't be stuck having to burn it. Nonetheless, the Mishnah says you can't do it. Why? The Chazal said because it's a gzeira. Shema yitrom shalom min ha-mukaf. Mukaf means adjacent or associated. So let's go back to my picture. I've got grapes here. And let's say I have 50 bushels of grapes here in Yad Binyamin. And I have another 50 bushels of grapes in my storehouse in Yerushalayim. Or I have 50 bushels of grapes in this house, and I have 50 bushels of grapes, a few hundred meters away. Yards if you're living in America. Okay, so that's Shalom Mina Mukaf. It's not adjacent. And there's a halacha that says you're not allowed to take Terumah Shalom Mina Mukaf. You're not allowed to take Terumah from grain that's not adjacent. I can't say, listen, since I have the grapes here in Yad Binyamin, I'll take Terumah for Yad Binyamin, and I'll exempt all my grapes wherever they are, in Yad Binyamin, in Rehovot, in Bnei Re'im, no matter where my grapes are, and then I exempt it. You can't do that. And Chazal were afraid that if we allowed you to take Terumah mitahor al hatamei, then there was a gzeira. We're afraid, Shema yitrom shalom mina mukaf. Okay, maybe you'll take a Terumah from something not adjacent. Okay, because you're afraid, you're afraid, Shema yigaha tamei b'tahor b'yitme'enu. Because the reason you would do tamei and tahor is because I have tamei here and tahor is over there, and I don't want to put them together. And therefore, that's what people would come to do if I allowed you to do tamei and tahor. Okay, v'anan ba'inan, we require ha'torem yitrom min ha'mukaf. Person who takes Terumah has to take from the adjacent. Doesn't have to be right next to it. But if we allow you to do Tamei on Tahor, then they were afraid, and obviously this happened, that people then took Terumah Shalom Min HaMukaf. Okay, and that's not permitted. So it was a Gzeira. V'im Tarmu, and for this reason, if you took off Terumah, Terumah, it is Terumah. The Terumah works from the Tahor ala Tamei. Because obviously, since it's only Gzeira, the Terumah actually works. Says the Mishnah, Be'emet Amru, in truth, and the Bartanura says, this is Gemara says, Kol hechet ataninim be'emet amru. Some say be'emet amru is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. He says, but it's ki'ilu halacha Moshe Sinai. It's an accepted tradition they had. It's not exactly halacha Moshe Sinai. He says because there were some examples. There's a couple of examples where the Mishnah says be'emet amru, and it's not halacha Moshe Sinai. But in general, when it says be'emet amru, take our word for it. Be'emet amru ha'igul shel deveila shenitma miksato. Let's say I have a round of deveila, of figs, a fig press. Okay, I'll show you a fig press. I found a picture of it. I've seen it before. Here we are. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. This is from an article in Haaretz, I think it was. Okay, you can see over here. Here is a pressed figs. This is a round of deveila. And in the times of Chazal, as we all know, they always looked for ways to preserve food. They would dry the figs out and then press it together. And then they would take, slices. And they would slice it and sell it in slices or give it out in slices. And that's how they preserved the figs. And figs grow abundantly in their trees. You don't want to lose it. Let's see if I can find the picture. Here we go. It's better. It's from Haaretz. You don't want to lose the figs, so they would press them together. So let's say part of my figs were touched by Tamei, and the other half were not. So the Bartanura explains, very interesting, in Igul Shei Dveila, Hadveilot mudbakot zo bazo b'derech igul. They're stuck together. Einam chashuvot chibor li'inyan tumah. That press is not considered a connection vis-a-vis tumah. So these dveilot, in one dveila apparently, if I had one round, then they're considered, that round is considered tamei. But let's say I've got 10 rounds together or 5 rounds and I put them all in a pan, and then one of them got touched Tamei. So if one of them was touched, so then they're not all Tamei. They're not considered, like remember when you buy the rolls and the rolls were all stacked next to each other? So that's the same way they would store the igulei tveilah. They would, stuff them in the pans or what have you. But if they're connected, but if one became Tamei, they would not all become Tamei. And for this reason, says the Mishnah, in truth, igul shel tveilah shenitma miksato. It sounds like one tveilah. What's interesting is it's part of it. But the Bartenura says it's not one. It says im naga tumah be'achat min hadveilot. If tumah touched one of them, then lo nitmot acher. Then the others are not. So I have to look into that. Why would that be? It seems like the igulei shel tveilah, okay, that part of it becomes tamei. The other parts are not considered tamei. The other parts are not considered. And the Kahati actually says, af al pisha teinim dvukot buzu bazu. Even though the figs themselves are stuck to one another. And chashuvot guf echad inyan tumah. It's not considered one goof. Okay, it's not considered one body vis-a-vis tumah. Even though it really seems like they're pressed together. So it's an interesting commentary. The Bartenura says that is one dveilah would be considered tamei. We're talking about a number of dveilot, and they're connected to one another. Tzarich iyun. So, but nonetheless, they said, "Ayigul shel dveilah shenitma mikzato torei min tahor." You could take off from the tahor, sheyeshbo ala tamei, sheyeshbo from the tahor in it ala tamei sheyeshbo. Same is true. V'chein agudah sheyerek, a bundle of vegetables. V'chein arema, the same thing is a pile of vegetation. Okay, but hayu shnei agulim, if there are 2 agulim, shtei agudot, 2 bundles, shtei aremot, 2 piles, achat tamei ve'achat tahora. One is tamei and one is tahor. Lo yitra mizel zeh. You should not lechatchila take truma from one on the other. And the Bartenura explains that why the Mishnah has to say the igul is one bundle, agudas they're tied together, arema they're not connected to each other. It's one pile. Nonetheless, in each of these cases. Okay, lo yitro, if it's one pile, you can torei minat tahor sheish bala tamei. But if it's more than one, lo yitro mizel zeh. Rabbi Eliezer says, tormin minat tahor ala tamei. He says, I don't believe in this whole gzeira at all. L'chatchila minat tahor ala tamei. Why? Delo gazar Rabbi Eliezer, shema yavo litro mishalo mina mukav. He says, I'm not gozer. I don't think it's a concern. If a person wants to take from the tahor ala tamei, great, then you don't have truma tameya. Nonetheless, we say, ein halacha. Rabbi Eliezer. The halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay? We will stop here. As always, we'll dedicate the learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. And this is my email address if you want to ask me questions. Or say hello. Have a great day.